My name is Carol. Standing on the stage of the community banquet, holding Mom's locket in my hand, I'm overwhelmed with a sense of peace and freedom that I've never felt before. The hall is empty now, and the memories of the past flood back like a tide. It all started at a family Thanksgiving dinner. The room was filled with the warm smell of turkey and the chatter of my family. My uncle, Mr. Thompson, a loud-mouthed man who always thought he knew best, joked, "Carol, still struggling to make ends meet?" I smiled and simply replied, "Actually, no." That's when my sister Lily's boyfriend, Tom, blurted out my Forbes profile, my company's acquisition, and the staggering figure of $26 million. The room fell into an icy silence. Lily's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. My father, Mr. Carter, a strict and traditional man, just stared at me with wide eyes, his fork clattering on the plate. "Mr. Thompson thundered, 26 what?" I sat there calmly, cutting my turkey. I knew this dinner was going to expose more than just envy, it was going to expose the truth about our family. Lily's jaw dropped, and her face contorted with disbelief and fury. 26 million? You, from that boring tech job? She shrieked. I didn't flinch. Yes, I said, slicing another piece of turkey. That boring job turned into a global analytics firm. I just didn't think it was dinner conversation. My mother, Mrs. Carter, a gentle but often powerless woman, tried to smooth things over. "Lily, sweetie, let's not make a scene." But Lily was already on her feet, her eyes blazing. "A scene? Are you kidding me, Mom? She's been sitting here quietly while we've supported her all these years, and she's been hiding millions." I set my fork down and looked at her. "You supported me? You mean those years I was living in a tiny studio apartment while you drove a luxury BMW paid for by Dad's money?" My father snapped his head towards me. "Watch your tone," he barked. I stood up, my voice steady. "No. You all watched me struggle, and now you're shocked that I didn't stay in that pit forever." Lily slammed her hand on the table, her eyes wet with anger. "You owe this family. You can't just disappear and come back rich." Mr. Thompson jumped in, his voice booming. "She's right, Carol. Family sticks together. You've got enough to make everyone comfortable. Why hide it?" "Because it was never about comfort. It was about control," I said, leaning back and looking at their faces. The people who had once pitted me, dismissed me, now saw me as a walking bank. "You didn't ask how I earned it. You just want to know how much you can take from me." Lily's voice cracked. "So, you're not even sorry?" "For what?" I asked. "For surviving without your so-called support?" That's when my father finally spoke, his voice soft and distant, like a man realizing the world he'd built was crumbling. "Carol, you should have told us." I met his gaze. "And you should have believed in me." The table went silent. The turkey steamed in the quiet room. For the first time, they saw me, not as the forgotten daughter, but as an untouchable force. Lily's meltdown escalated. She grabbed her napkin, threw it down, and shouted, "You always wanted to outshine me. You probably planned this." I stayed calm. "You can't plan success, Lily. You work for it." She snapped, "Oh, don't act so high and mighty. You think money makes you better? You're still the boring one who always craved attention." But her words didn't hurt me anymore. They were like old wounds that had finally healed. Mr. Thompson jumped in again. "Carol, maybe it's time you give back. Family was there for you when you were down." I turned to him slowly. "You mean the time you charged me rent to stay in your basement when my car broke down?" "Yeah, I remember." The room froze once more. My mother whispered, "Carol, please, this isn't." "No," I said, leaning forward. "This is Thanksgiving. It's about gratitude. Thank you, Mr. Thompson, for teaching me how to be independent. Thank you, Lily, for showing me what favoritism is. And thank you, Dad, for never believing in me. Because you made me who I am today. Lily's eyes filled with tears, not of remorse but of humiliation. You're disgusting. Money has turned you cold. I shook my head. No, being ignored did. Money just gave me a voice. Then, my father stood up, his voice trembling with anger. Enough. This family has been through enough. We can't let greed destroy us. Greed? I echoed. I didn't come here asking for anything. But the moment you found out about my wealth, you all looked at me like I was a walking safe. My mother finally whispered, Carol, maybe you should go. I nodded slowly, grabbed my coat, and said, You're right. I'll go. But remember, you pushed me away once for being a nobody. Don't push me away again for being someone. The door shut behind me with a soft thud. As I walked to my car, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the relief of finally speaking my truth. The cold night air hit me like a wake-up call. I sat in the car, looking at my reflection in the dark window. For the first time, I saw the woman who had built something no one could take away from her. But the family war didn't end that night. The next morning, my phone was bombarded with missed calls, group texts, and guilt-tripping messages. Lily texted, Can't believe you humiliated me in front of everyone. Mr. Thompson said, You should apologize. It's not right to flaunt your wealth when others are struggling. My father texted, Let's talk privately. We can fix this. I replied with a single message, No one is entitled to the life I built. I owe no one an apology for my success. Then I muted the group. An hour later, my father showed up at my apartment unannounced, holding a pie box. Carol, he said, his tone softer. Lily is hurt. You embarrassed her. She embarrassed herself, I said. I just stopped pretending. He sighed. You've changed. I looked him in the eye. No, Dad. I just stopped living by your rules. He opened his mouth to argue, but his voice faltered when he saw the framed newspaper article on my counter. Seattle's youngest female tech executive to launch community grant program. His eyes softened. You're helping people now? Yes, I said. The kind of people who never got a chance, the kind you never believed in. He nodded slowly, unable to meet my gaze. Your mother would have been proud, he murmured before walking out. And for the first time, I didn't chase his approval. I just let him go. In the following weeks, Lily went into full-blown meltdown mode. She called our mutual friends, sobbing that I had ruined Thanksgiving, that I was heartless, and that money had turned me cruel. But everyone knew my story. They had seen the years I was left out of family vacations, the birthdays that were forgotten, and the way my father used to introduce me as the other one. One day, Rachel, a board member of my company, knocked on my office door and handed me an envelope. These came for you, she said with a knowing smile. Inside was a typed letter from my parents. Dear Carol, we've talked as a family. We think things got out of hand. You've always been generous. We'd like to rebuild our relationship privately. Also, Lily's tuition is due this month, and your father thought you might want to help, given your success. Love, Mom and Dad. I laughed out loud. It was a dry, almost hysterical laugh. They didn't want reconciliation, they just wanted to restore their comfortable lifestyle. I wrote back a short, firm letter. Dear family, I've paid enough for my silence, my absence, and your approval. I'm done paying for your comfort. Forward future requests to my lawyer. Sincerely, Carol. When I sent the letter, I expected to feel guilt or regret, but instead, I felt free, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. That night, I met with my team to expand the community grant fund. We named it the Someday Project, after the old coffee can I used to save my tips in. As the months passed, I focused on the project. We expanded to Denver, sponsoring scholarships for girls in underfunded schools. Every check I signed was a step further away from the old me. One evening, while I was reviewing scholarship applications, an email popped up. No subject line, no sender's name. Just a simple message, "You're doing good things. Maybe one day I'll deserve your forgiveness. L." I stared at the screen for a long time. This time, it wasn't a manipulation. It was a sincere and fragile plea. I didn't reply, and I didn't delete it either. Maybe this was the first honest thing Lily had ever said to me. Winter faded into spring, and the bitterness in my heart began to thaw. I still hadn't spoken to Lily, but I no longer felt anger when her name came up. I realized that this was the real victory, not revenge, but release. One morning, my office assistant rushed in, her eyes wide. "There's someone here to see you." Before I could respond, Lily walked in. She looked nothing like the perfect, polished girl I had resented growing up. Her hair was messy, her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and she was carrying a simple tote bag instead of her designer purse. She stood there awkwardly, holding an envelope. "I didn't know where else to go," she said softly. I stayed seated, my arms crossed. "Why now?" She took a deep breath. "Because I need to apologize while it still matters." I didn't say a word. I just let her speak. "I hated you," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Not because you did anything wrong, but because you survived what I couldn't. Dad made me feel like the world would end if I wasn't perfect. You left that house and built something real. I stayed and pretended." She handed me the envelope. Inside was a handwritten, tear-stained letter. "I lied about you because I wanted to feel important. I broke something I didn't know how to fix. I don't want your money. I just want peace." When I looked up, she was crying silently. "I can't erase what I did," she whispered, "but I can start telling the truth." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. "You already did," I said quietly. She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Can I hug you?" It took me a moment, but then I nodded. It wasn't forgiveness at that moment, it was an acknowledgement. Two grown women finally realizing that the war was over. 3 months later, our family gathered again, not for a tense dinner, but for a community banquet. The Someday Project had funded its 100th scholarship. Reporters were mingling, local leaders were speaking, and I stood at the podium under the soft stage lights, looking out at a crowd that included faces I never thought I'd see again. In the front row, my father sat next to Lily. He looked older and smaller, but there was peace in his eyes. Lily gave me a nervous smile, not the old smug one, but a real and fragile one. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath. I used to think success meant proving everyone wrong. But now I know it's about proving to myself that I can rise, even when no one claps. A soft ripple of applause followed. After the speech, Lily approached me backstage. "You were incredible," she said, her voice steady. "You really built something beautiful." I smiled. "So did you. You came back. That takes courage." She hesitated, then handed me a small box. "Dad wanted you to have this." Inside was Mom's locket, a gold, old-fashioned locket engraved with our names, Carol and Lily. I hadn't seen it since I was a child. "I thought he sold this years ago," I whispered. "He almost did," she said, but I stopped him. I told him maybe someday you'd want it back. For the first time, I didn't feel the weight of resentment in my chest. I just felt gratitude, quiet and real. Standing on the empty stage that night, holding the locket, I knew that all those years of chasing approval, running from envy, and carrying anger had led me to this moment of freedom. I looked up at the lights and whispered, "I didn't buy peace. I earned it." And as I stepped down from the stage, I saw Lily waiting by the door, waving, not as my rival, but as my sister.